Hello, it's Chris Hall here from Charity Digital. Back on Thursday, the 7th of November 2019, we hosted our very first virtual conference, Digital Fundraising Day. We welcomed over 1,000 charity professionals for an informative day of webinars, podcasts, and videos that highlighted the importance and future impact of digital fundraising. And all the attendees that joined us on that day took key learnings back to their organisation to both kickstart and build on their fundraising initiatives. And now, with a recent outbreak of coronavirus, digital fundraising has become critically important to charity survival. And while making the rapid change to digital is a necessity, how can charities set themselves up to support the transition long term? We answered a lot of those questions back in November. And as we look to navigate the murky waters of COVID-19 work life, we want to share all those incredible webinar sessions with those of you who couldn't make it on the day. In these webinars, we've included the original Q&A recording for you, but if you do have any questions about any of the content, please pop them in the comment box below and we'll come straight back to you. Also, if there's something specific you're struggling with during these times, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We've provided a link in the description of this video below that you can ask us a question or even share your story with us. Thanks a bunch and enjoy the webinar.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Chevalier and I'd like to welcome you back to Digital Fundraising Day 2019. This is our fifth session of the day and our second webinar. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined here by Gavin Pollock and Alan Perestrello of Trillium. Trillium are a company that combines strategy, CRM and digital, and they're going to be talking on what I think is a really interesting and important area today, which is people over platform. So how do you actually balance those two things? I shall hand over now to Gavin and Alan.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. My name's Alan, and I'm joined by my co-founder and business partner, Gavin. And we really wanted to just sort of talk about a topic that's coming up quite often these days, and that's something that we see as quite important in the digital transformation journey, and that is putting people over platforms.
Morning, everybody. Thanks to have you all here.
So what we wanted to do is just sort of set a bit of a background in terms of why we think experience matters, and something that's quite important to us in terms of the way we deliver the digital transformation solutions for our clients is that we integrate and unify CRM, digital, which is websites, marketing, automation, and we do that by bringing them together with a cohesive strategy. And that kind of strategy piece is really what we wanted to focus on today. So just looking at what we're going to cover as a brief agenda, looking at the current state of the NFP sector from a technology perspective as we see it. A kind of key point for us at the moment is don't buy technology, which might seem strange coming from two co-founders of a technology company. And then defining your objectives, do's and don'ts for how you set out sort of the strategy, a couple of do's and don'ts from a procurement perspective. And then we'd like to share with you some thoughts and background on a case study we've recently completed for the Royal College of Physicians, and then hopefully some Q&A at the end of the session. So just looking at the digital landscape in the NFP sector, from our perspective, one of the things that we see is kind of prevalent thing at the moment is that with all the change in terms of responding to how people interact with digital channels, there's a lot of pressure to do more, but with less resources, less money, less time. And whilst there's a lot of opportunity to be gained from all the change, it is quite challenging at times for you all to be able to do what you need to do. Probably one of the things that we see is kind of a kind of stumbling block in the sector at the moment is the dependency on aging fundraising platforms. They're kind of, maybe those platforms are struggling to keep up with some of the demand and some of the challenges around integration, usability, and generating the insights that you need to be able to figure out where to focus your activities. And at the moment, digital transformation seems to be the biggest topic by far, based on the amount of activity that we see in the market, number of conversations that we had with clients and prospective clients at events, and just the sheer fact that there's a number of people attending this session means that it's still quite front of mind. We think change is essential, and there's a recognition within the sector that change is essential, but also that it can be difficult. And it's difficult because of resources, it's difficult because of time, but it's also difficult because you've maybe not done this before. So being able to work with someone that you trust and can help you navigate this is quite important. But again, I think there's a real opportunity to be had from a lot of the change at the moment. And I think we can all see the opportunities from being able to engage better with donors and fundraisers through digital and social initiatives is probably going to have the biggest impact on our abilities over the next 5 years. So we just wanted to ask you a quick question here, and I was asked to put up an inspirational quote around sort of saying looking for them, and I found this one and thought it was quite an interesting one, and we wanted to know who said this, if you don't mind. So, don't buy technology to solve your digital transformation challenge. It's about strategy and people. So we're going to give you about another 30 or 40 seconds just to tell us, who do you think said that? All right, so I think most interestingly, Steve Jobs comes up as the person most likely to have said that. The shocking news there is actually probably the lowest response. Their second lowest response was actually me. So apologies for sort of duping you, but I thought it was a good way to kind of generate a little bit of interest in the topic, and that is, it's actually something that Gavin and I have been saying for quite a while now, and it comes across as being quite strange for two founders of technology company to say, don't buy technology. But in our years of working with a number of clients and across a lot of projects, we actually think this is the most important thing to ensure success around this, because fundamentally, digital transformation is actually all about the people, and it's about your strategy for how you interact and engage with them better. So fundamentally, what we're leading on is the concept of, if you start with thinking about a technology, and a lot of conversations we have with clients around replacing an existing database or a CRM or a website. And a lot of those conversations tend to be about features and functions. But if you start there, you run the risk of just defining the outcome by those features rather than by the things you need, or more importantly, what your users, donors, and fundraisers may need. At the moment, there are a lot of tenders out there that we're working on and responding to. And a lot of those tenders are all very feature and function focused. They're about replacing this particular system or this particular feature or function. But quite often, they don't tell us about the business problem we're solving, or about what impact we need to have, or what the outcomes are. And we think that's actually quite important. Starting with defining your technical sort of requirements sort of leads you into a position where you start shoehorning your requirements into a tech platform, which also doesn't work. So we see a lot of people looking at great platforms and assuming that all of those requirements can be met by all of those platforms. Sometimes they can, but more often than not, they can't. For us, it's really important that you start with a strategy. And sometimes that can be hard because it's about recognizing that maybe you don't have that strategy. And a lot of times we're seeing that people are purchasing the technology as a way of getting the strategy. That to us is like putting the cart before the horse. Choosing the right partner for your organization is probably the most important part of this journey, because the right partner will be able to lead you and guide you through this and give you the advice and guidance you need to ensure success. And with that in mind, we really think you should present your partner with the problem, not the outcome. So if you find the right partner, you can integrate with them and their way of thinking.
I think it's fair to say there's a lot of good technology out there. So currently, you almost don't need to choose technology. It's hard for us to say it because we are a technology partner, but most of the technical options out there can probably meet your requirements. And that's why we focus on making sure that we understand the problem, because how we interpret your problem into the technology is, what's the important part and should be the important part for any partner.
And making sure that it's fundamentally people-centric, because I think coming back to what we see digital transformation as the response in the way that human beings are changing their way of interacting and communicating and transacting in a digital way, it's still fundamentally all about people. And we think that sometimes gets lost when you focus on the technology. One of the things that we're seeing a lot at the moment is that there's a recognition that through the amount of change that this transformation will happen, in fact, it's kind of intrinsic in the word in transformation, is that these things are more about a change program and about changing how your organization will adapt its service offering, its processes, its ways of working to taking on board these new technologies and how they can influence your organization.
There has to be a recognition, like we kind of said in one of those first slides, change is hard. You know, it's really a big undertaking to change in one of these processes.
So we wanted to ask you another poll question. This one isn't a trick question, I promise. We just wanted to know, does your organization have a digital strategy? So we're seeing quite a few results coming in, so thanks very much. Quite gratifying to see the bar charts moving so quickly. So I think we'll take that as a result.
Yeah.
And great to see that a lot of you have a strategy in progress, and I think that's probably the most comforting information to take from the poll, which is great. So thanks for sharing. I think it's also kind of interesting to note that of the people who aren't already in process, 26% in them, you're not necessarily there yet with the strategy, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you shouldn't start the transformation. It just defines where you start the transformation.
So I think it's fair that we've looked into this and we've seen a lot of research and actually from the Charity Digital Skills Report in 2019, the results were that more than half of the charities at the moment don't have a digital strategy. So it's not uncommon, really, that a lot of organizations are moving towards this but don't have it yet.
So we think that, in terms of a strategy, it should really be there to define your objectives, and those objectives should influence the program. They should be at the center and the heart of everything that it should be. But in terms of defining your objectives, we'd like to share with you some sort of things we think don't help or possibly detract from the value of having a really good strategy that's objective based. And that is, fundamentally, don't make assumptions about the donors and the fundraisers and what they need. I think that because we see a lot of change around existing platforms and listing processes in existing ways, there's a risk of assuming that what you've currently been doing will continue to work in a new digital world. So replacing or maintaining existing processes in the new digital world may not be the best way to approach it. It's also important to not let technology lead the conversation. Quite often these days, we're seeing a lot of talk around artificial intelligence, machine learning, chatbots. We don't know for certain that every single one of these new channels works for every single one of the donors. And without the data to underpin that, or the research or the understanding, all we do is run the risk of letting the technology lead the conversation rather than the conversation be about people. We think it's really important to separate realistic and aspirational objectives. Quite often, the aspirational objectives could overtake the most simple and basic ones.
There's a lot of pressure to innovate at the moment. It's a topic that keeps on coming up. Everyone keeps on saying, you need to innovate, you need to be innovative. But really, it's really important not to innovate just for the sake of showing innovation. Be pragmatic, be realistic, have aspirational objectives, but don't make them core to what's needed.
And I think if you think about some of the world's greatest innovations, some of them started first and foremost by being a mistake. So you've got to realize that being innovative has got two sides to it. It's got some ups and it's always going to have some downs. It's important also to not exclude any stakeholders in this process. The process might have started with board level approval because you needed the funds and the resources to proceed. But it's also about ensuring that management, staff, and your volunteers are all on board with where you need to go. So all of your objectives need to take all of your audiences into account. So what should you do? Again, we think putting people at the center of your strategy is the heart of everything you should do. I would always suggest focusing on why you do what you do as an organization, what you do, and then how you're going to do it. If you can illustrate those three things clearly, you'll put yourself at a very good starting point for ensuring that your strategy underpins your transformation. You should always think about clarifying your fundraising goals. They might be simplistic or they might be complicated, but if you can write them down and you can explain them and you can put them at the center of your strategy, you stand a better chance of your strategy meeting them. Far too often, we'll see a strategy that's quite aspirational, but leaves out the most basic of fundraising objectives. You should always ensure that they're realistic, in that we can achieve the results that you need to achieve. And we think the best way to do that is to ensure that you can benchmark them against the other organizations within your sector. We think that's probably one of the best things about working in the NFP sector, is that there isn't a sort of cutthroat competitiveness. People are willing to share their experiences and share their lessons learned, and you can benefit a lot from those lessons. You should also test your assumptions, making sure that you know that they're going to be viable. If you're going to embark on a big change program that consumes lots of funds and resources, it's best to ensure that you've tested them to make sure that they're going to generate the best results for you. As I said, you can always benchmark against others, and looking out there's a lot of great research. Certainly the Charity Digital website is a great place to find existing case studies and examples of things that have worked and things that haven't. It's important to understand and identify what success looks like. So if you know where you want to get to, you stand a better chance of getting there. And for us, it goes to the heart of what we're about when we say experience matters. If you focus on the user, donor, and fundraising experience, you're almost guaranteed success. The best way to do that is to ensure that you understand what people value and how to make sure you get there. In terms of procurement, this is probably a tricky topic, because if there are any people involved in procurement on the webinar, you probably want to focus on a lot of things that ensure that you get the procurement right. However, sometimes we think procurement can sometimes get in the way of implementing that strategy. And I think it's really important to not forget why the organization's on this journey. So procurement is typically about detail, but we'd encourage you not to get too focused on the detail and ensure that you can communicate and deliver rather than focus on detail that might be distracting. It's important to understand what your organization needs and make it clear to partners if you're working with them. There's no set formula on how to do this, so it's best to engage in a conversation and ensure that the procurement process is as conversational as possible, because that allows any partners that you're working with to better understand you, and that will ultimately deliver the best result.
Yeah, don't be afraid to make the right mistakes. It's okay to make some mistakes as long as you learn from them. Obviously, making some mistakes right at the beginning of the process in terms of initial choices and decisions might be trickier to come back from, but everyone's going to learn from the process as you go through it.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes you could remember that some of the best mistakes have turned out to be the biggest successes. I personally always like to think of 3M Post-it notes, which started out as a mistake because someone was looking for the perfect glue so that something would never be reusable. But in fact, we all love 3M Post-its for it. We were thinking of a good analogy for how to illustrate this point. And some of it came around, possibly if you were looking to, bake a cake, would you start by buying the right tool? Or would you start by looking at the recipe and thinking about what the outcome is? But we were honest with ourselves and thought about our own purchasing habits. And we all agreed that actually we do like buying some good tech just for the sake of it.
I got a new Magimix.
Yeah, I would imagine that's probably a fairly common thing. DIY tools was the other analogy where we failed to illustrate this. But if you keep your objective central to the process, you stand a really good chance of ensuring that you don't put the cart before the horse. And if you start by identifying the question, not the answer, you stand a chance of ensuring that your partners and all the stakeholders on the journey will be able to respond to it and move forward in a positive way. When we see a lot of vendor selection processes that are going out from a procurement perspective, we think it's really important to look at first the right partner and then the technology. Sometimes procurement processes select a technology, a platform, and then preclude a lot of really good partners who might have good strategic objectives or good capabilities, but who don't have the platform you've chosen. We support a broad range of platforms, and if we're honest, we benefit from the fact that people are choosing platforms we work on and support. So that works in our favor. But ultimately, the right partner will have the right platform. And since this is about people, the people in those partnerships will be better at delivering things if you're working at a people level than a technical level. So I'd always say the right partner will have the right technology. Perhaps one of the trickiest topics we always come across with from a procurement perspective in a tender is around budget. And the reality is we can work to almost any budget. And that means making prioritization choices within that budget. But if we don't know the budget, we're forced to present something that might not be right for you or your organization.
And that's not an exact number, but it is about ranges, and it's about understanding kind of what type of bucket you fit into and what kind of level of solution as an organization you're looking for.
Yeah. If we know what the budget will be, we can best advise on what prioritization tasks you might need to take and whether you can achieve all your objectives, or whether we need to refocus the strategy to work within the budget you've got, not the other way around. It's always important to keep a contingency. So if you're applying for a budget, I would always encourage you to apply for the core budget and then a contingency. Transformation projects can be challenging, and if they're any good, they're going to uncover new things you didn't know about, and that's what a contingency should be for. Expecting that at the outset of an 18-month journey, you're going to know every single route along the way without a contingency is going to ensure that you set your project up almost certainly to fail, not to succeed. Recognizing that the project is just one part and the start of one journey, you should always plan for continuous improvement beyond the go live. Too many projects we see focus just on going live, but not what happens afterwards. If we think about the reality of what you're trying to achieve, you need to be flexible and you need to respond to the future challenges. If we think about 10 years, going back 10 years, we certainly couldn't have predicted 10 years ago the prevalence and impact of digital and social channels on modern consumer behavior. Being able to predict the next one is hard. Having the right platform in place will help you do that, but you should also plan to be able to adapt and respond. And that could happen in 3 months, 6 months, or 2 years.
Yeah, going live is, it's the start of the new journey, but that's where the fun starts. Once you're live, actually, you're still changing, because at that point, that's when all your users and your stakeholders get to meet this new thing for the first time. And they have to then actually adopt this new platform, this new way of working, and it's change, and change is hard. So, having a structure in place, that means that you can continually look at that and improve it as you go along and bring people on with you is super important.
So we wanted to just share with you very quickly some high-level outputs from a case study we've recently completed with the Royal College of Physicians, who've been a client of ours for a very long time.
Yeah, we've been working with the Royal College of Physicians for about 7 or 8 years now. They are a very long-standing organization with about 500 years of legacy. They had multiple internal systems that we helped them move onto Dynamics 365 as a platform over the years. But this particular challenge more recently started coming to light that in the development side of things, on the fundraising elements, they had a real challenge. They were using a separate system for the fundraising element. Was siloed within the department, and there was no visibility of the donors and how they interrelated to all of the other individuals and stakeholders that were in their core systems. And because of all of that, they had no facility for meaningful donor nurturing and a really manual process for recording and managing all the donations and especially things like recurring donations. So we worked with them to go through bunch of sessions, scoping, planning workshops, and we came up with a fairly detailed design and implementation plan to move them away from the siloed fundraising system and bring the solution into Dynamics 365 along with all the other elements of what they needed or what they have in terms of the membership and examinations and education aspects of the individuals that they work with. What we were aiming for was getting that 360-degree view of the donor and where they sit within the wider real estate of the people that they work with. And a lot of that, once we brought that view internally into the core system, then we were looking at automation and how we could really make the process far more efficient. So what they have now, we've taken fundraising into the Dynamics 365 solution, and they're reaping the benefits from that. You know, we now have a single source of truth across the fundraising side of things as well as the rest of the organization. We have centralized reporting, immediate results in terms of being able to see exactly how they're doing on their fundraising missions. We can really track what's working, what's not working. It's all tied together with the marketing automation elements and nurture campaigns. They've got all sorts of recurring automation and direct debit processing, which now means they can actually forecast their revenue accurately. And all the data is centralized, obviously within a lovely GDPR compliant solution at the moment.
But I think the key takeaway for this particular case study was that we didn't start by looking at kind of what was the technical solution. We looked at what processes we could improve. And really for this, the strategy was to make things easier for the internal team to capitalize on the opportunities that their members had as donors for looking to support their charitable mission. So the outcome here was really improved donor and internal user experiences. And this is just the start of a journey. We're about to implement the second phase, which will further optimize the online user experience to improve the whole donor journey. So takeaways we wanted to leave you with just as we start to run out of time was that we think it's really important that you clarify your fundraising objectives at the outset of the journey. Understand the donor and supporter needs, look into doing any research that you can to understand those and put those at the center, because ultimately it's all about the people. If you choose the right partner, they should be able to help you with that, whether you have a strategy or not, and ensuring that they're part of that journey is important. It should always be people-centric, and to that end, if you can write your strategies to ensure that your procurement processes leverage the people elements, we think your projects will have a better chance of success.
Good. Well, thank you very much for that, Alan and Gavin. Some really fascinating content there, and it's driven a lot of questions already. We're a little tight on time, so we'll crack into the first few of those. So first question, this is from Mandy. We currently have separate fundraising and digital strategies. Would you recommend keeping this or integrating them?
I think if you've got the opportunity to integrate them, I think that they should be. I think the only risk there is that if you think purely in a digital world, there will be some parts of your fundraising strategy that aren't going to be entirely digital. Yeah. But ultimately, digital isn't just about databases and systems. So if you can tie those two things together, you'll get better insights from online, offline, digital, non-digital solutions or fundraising initiatives. But if you can pull them into one central place that will allow you to analyze and determine which ones are working better for you, then you'll stand a better chance of meeting your objectives. So if you can, I would always say they should be integrated.
Mm. And in terms of the objectives, Olivia was asking, should the objectives for the strategy be their mission-driven ones, which for them is conservation of endangered species, or fundraising objectives?
I think if we know the sort of mission objectives, we should be able to then deliver the sort of fundraising objectives, and then how do we implement them? So I think they should be kind of aligned, but I don't think one's more important than the other.
Yeah. Okay, good. And a question from Aisha. which kind of links to the question before, but it's more about the process. So in their organisation, digital strategy tends to be led by fundraising, but obviously other areas should be involved as well. So who should actually take the lead in this process, and how should the budget contribution be split between them?
Well, I think every organisation is different. So without knowing Aisha's organisation and how they're set up, but I think it's comforting to hear that the digital strategy is led by the fundraising team. That's probably what I'd suggest it should be. And no offence to the IT guys on the session, but this probably shouldn't be an IT project. Yeah. IT should be involved, but shouldn't be driving it. From a budget contribution perspective, I think if your organisation is really going to buy into the digital transformation piece, the budget should really come from all departments. All departments will benefit from it, will be affected by it. So it shouldn't just be one particular budget that contributes to this. And that goes and speaks to the point around getting sure that all the stakeholders are involved. It should be an organizational budget if possible, because then it forces everybody to contribute and work together to delivering the organization's objectives, not just the departments.
And I mean, obviously every organization is different, so it really doesn't, depend on internally how you're structured and well, what your CFO says as well.
Yeah. I think it's been some really stimulating content. Big focus on digital strategy. It's a subject that we at Charity Digital feel really passionate about, and we've actually got more content coming up on this as well. So do please engage with Trillium, but also hang around for more of our content on this subject matter as well. Got to sign off now. So thank you very much from me, and look forward to talking to you all online shortly.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for all joining.
Thanks very much.